Доброго дня, шановні колеги, вітаємо вас в українському.
Esteemed colleagues, we're talking about changes taking place in regulations in Ukraine, and today we'll be talking about tariffs in energy sector, about how incentive tariffing could change the electricity market of Ukraine. That's a key topic. We have several participants. I would like to invite Dmytro, Vovk, head of the National Commission for State Regulation in Energy and Utilities. I would like to welcome everyone. Before starting presentation, I would like to thank UCMC and the leaders of the center for this opportunity to provide objective information about strategic actions of NKREKP, which includes also switch to incentive type tariff setting. So some of the questions which were asked by experts, by journalists are: why have the EU countries moved to this type of tariff setting? What were strategic mistakes? What's the difference between expenditures plus from incentive type tariff setting? And I would like to disclose all the myths and show the reality. Talking about stimulating regulation. The EU countries started switching to incentive tariff setting 25 years ago. Great Britain was among first ones in Europe. There were 3 waves of introducing that. The first wave was before 2000. The big countries that switched to such tariff setting were Great Britain, Norway, and Portugal. These are the countries, I called them Northern Western pioneers. The second wave was the southern countries, and the last wave, Germany and France, that joined this type of tariff setting in 2009. What has this type of tariff setting give us? The first country was Great Britain. The slide shows the results they achieved. 2 key indicators here. The first, which should be of interest for consumers, and the second of interest for the company. In the result, in 15 years, they managed to reduce Saidi.
На одного абонента визначається в хвилинах на рік. Вона зменшилась з 164 хвилини до 100 хвилин. Це зменшення відповідає 40%. Другий показник.
The second indicator, which is of interest for the company, is increase the profitability of EBITDA margin. It grew up by 1.5%. What's of interest? What happened in 15 years? There was a general reduction of tariff for distribution. The next slides will explain how that is possible. All the documents in Ukraine provide for introduction of this type of tariff setting. It also corresponds to EU Directive number 72, which says that there should be the elements of stimulating when introducing the tariff setting. stimulating or incentive type of tariff setting. The documents were finalized in 2013. Almost all the regulations were passed. These regulations were developed for the money received from the EBRD, World Bank of Reconstruction and Development loan. The concept was what should be used when switching to the stimulating tariff setting system. The project was called Implement Methodology but in 2013 we did not switch to that, and when myself and new members of the Commission joined NKREKP, we updated the regulatory basis. We reconsidered all the key indicators that affect the activities of the company. Many meetings were held with ideologies of this system of tariff setting. Mr. Rogozin, Mr. Katko, and others. The updating of the regulatory basis was taking place transparently. April and May was the time when all the provisions and the best practices of other countries were analyzed, all the indicators were analyzed. In August, all the drafts were approved at the open meetings of the Commission. They were downloaded to the official website of the Commission. For a month they were there. After that, there was an approval by all the stakeholders. And in the beginning of October, the open meeting of the Commission, there was online broadcasting. We approved the key resolutions. Despite all the calls to experts to come and provide comments, there were few people at the meeting. Only Mr. Bagatov was present, who in the result of the presentation applauded us. We expected something else. After the Commission approved it, there was a process of state registration and publication last week. It was officially published, so the Commission created preconditions to transfer to stimulating tariff setting. If we compare the costs plus and stimulating tariff setting, we need to pay attention to strategic mistakes committed by the previous leadership of the country when forming the tariffs. If you look at this graph, it has two parts. One which is in red frame, that's wrong. It shows the key components of tariff. The whole tariff is profit for investment program, depreciation, and operational expenditures. The correct approach should be when depreciation is included into finance. That didn't happen. And then the result of the assessment made by the State Property Fund, it's clear. If you compare depreciation included into the tariff with the depreciation and the result of the assessment of the State Property Fund, in the past, the tariff accounted for only 1/4 of needed depreciation. In the right corner, you can see four in blue and one in black. if you move, if you
compare the correct approach, expenses plus about stimulating regulation, let's think about the key components of the tariffs. Tariff profit here is composed of the financing source. Companies don't have legal profit at all. Second, depreciation, financial depreciation, and evaluating expenses. And on the right side of this slide, you can see the formation of the tariff in the case of stimulating regulation, because it is composed from the price, expenses, depreciation also, assets, and it forms a new benefit. If we look at the depreciation, it was made in the following way. In 2013, by the Fund of State Property was made in method, and the principles are the following: the cost of replacement, taking into consideration tear and wear, and disposal, and the time of depreciation is 30 years. About asset base, it is calculated based on the evaluation of previous component, and second component, the norms of profit that depends academically from the cost of the capital in the countries. Our consultants in other countries also said about it. A lot of attention in media were devoted to
Призвести до
this has to lead to increase of tariffs, but no one paid attention to that slide. At expenses plus, not all depreciation was taken into account. Not everyone considered that in the future this will lead to decrease. If you look at the rates, you see 5 countries of Europe which have stimulating tariff setting, and Ukraine. In Europe, they apply single rates for basis of assets. Here you see Greece has 11% because the cost of capital is higher than in France, where it is 7%. In Ukraine, even the accounting rate of the National Bank is more than 20%. In Ukraine, we suggested different rates for assets base. For the new one, it's lower than the one that exists. For the old one, 3 times lower than suggested for the new base. If you compare expenditures plus and stimulating regulation, the main logic is the companies have the commitment to reduce the cost of services, they have to ensure the quality, and they have legal ability to receive profit and stimulate savings. In the past, that was not the case. Stimulating regulation in long-term period is, we have the basic period where we define depreciation, profitability for old base, and we have the tariff revenues. And then there are regulatory periods for which some indicators are fixed. We have the graph of reducing the costs, of optimizing the costs, of enhancing the quality, of reducing the SAIDI, and also the fines are introduced. To the right, you see the dark blue line, which shows needed reduction and the actual expenditures of the company. When this line stops in blue segment, the fines are applied to the company, and the fines in the past were up to 2%. Now we suggest that they should be up to 5% of tariff revenues of the company. The first regulatory period is 3 years, the second one is 5 years. So to sum it up, introducing stimulating regulation will allow to reduce expenditures, to enhance the quality indicators, and to apply penalties. The next slide looks at the advantages and the deficiencies of two methods. With expenditures plus, there are no incentives. The companies have to prove that they have to prove that their depreciation is not tax-based but financial. The incentive as to reducing electricity so incentives as to reducing the expenditures of electric energy in grid. With the expenditures plus, they stimulate, in stimulating settling they don't. They do. In the beginning of 2000, there were large losses. The companies were to be encouraged to reduce the losses. The component of the tariff today, which no one notices, but those who pay do notice that besides tariff revenues, we need to add losses, saving from losses, and they could come up to 20-30%.
Стимулюючий тариф утворення передбачатиме наступне.
Instead of using the economic ratio which is calculated, you need to move to the graph of losses. Operational expenditures are set from the achieved level in stimulating setting, annual indexation of basic levels, taking into account the ratio of efficiency. Incentives to enhance the quality of services. With expenditures plus, they are absent. With stimulating regulation, there are graphs according to SAIDI on uninterrupted electricity supply to consumers, and the penalties are applied. If the graph is violated, they could come up to 5% from the revenues of the company. We looked at depreciation in case of cost plus. It wasn't used de facto in stimulating regulation. It's used in full amount, and it allows to finance the upgrading of grids. The profit with cost plus, we don't have it, and stimulating we have two rates. That is the penalty for the company. The first penalty is that 14.79% rate compared to the real cost of the capital. The second penalty is that 5% is applied. The third penalty is that 50% is the commitment to reinvest.
Утворення. У випадку стимулюючого тарифоутворення компанія має самостійно визначати необхідний і достатній рівень фінансування для того, аби досягнути необхідних показників якості. Це був з нашої точки зору компроміс комісії, що при застосуванні ставки на стару базу активів, що буде викликати безліч критики, хоча насправді вона мала бути на рівні щонайменше 15%, зобов'язати компанії реінвестувати щонайменше амортизацію, це безумовно, і друге – це 50% від доходу прибутку на стару базу активів. Період регулювання.
Period of regulation, cost plus, it's annual, in stimulating settling, it's more long term. First stage 3 years to analyze and monitor, and next period's 5 years. Indicators of quality are not applied in cost plus and stimulating settling, we can move to that. It is now very difficult to analyze Saidi. What does the stimulating settling give to all the participants of this sector? We have 3 key interests which are to be balanced: consumer, state, and the companies. When you applying stimulating tariff settling, we match the interests of all, because the consumers receive more reliable electricity supply. For the state, that means the reduction of subsidies for the regions. And forming the cost for state package of shares of Obelenregos. If any investor is interested in buying the shares, they have to calculate how much profit does this business generate. With existing system, there's no profit, and there's no logic in purchasing the shares. If when applying stimulating tariff setting, they can calculate some cash flow for distribution companies, for participants of the business. That's attracting large-scale effective investments with some horizon of planning. And this is incentive to reduce all possible losses. Today's conditions which are created could be compared to the desire of the company. In 2016, technically, those who could be ready. There are 6 companies, but this should be the pilot project. First year we'll be able to analyze, to see all advantages, disadvantages, and in the future to apply it to all companies which will be fulfilling all the criteria. Thank you.
Дякую за таку ґрунтовну презентацію.
Thank you for this presentation. I would like to invite Andriy Herus, who maybe will provide some comments and maybe will explain the logic. Then later there will be Q&A session. Good afternoon. Thank you for inviting. Thank you for organizing the discussion on such important topic because this problem, what we are discussing, will have an influence on energy sector, on participants and consumers of the market for several decades. First of all, I would like in simple words to demonstrate what Obelenерго is, what they are doing, whether they have profit or not, and which profit should be taken where. Obelenерgo's work with profit. Officially, there wouldn't be such a battle for Obelenерgo if they were not receiving profits. First of all, they earn on tenders. I believe this is no secret that the tenders are at the high cost, receiving 7% into the profit, then new connections and technical conditions, any new consumer can get such technical requirements that he will have to build a nuclear reactor. If they want to get normal technical conditions, they have to pay some money. So that normal conditions are given. Also, the suppliers that are operating at non-regulated tariff. We had the situation when Poltava could not supply electricity via their supplier at regulated tariff, and this way they were paying 15 million hryvnias extra a month because one of the shareholders of Poltava Obelenерgo didn't want to let him in. Next is subcontractual works which are done by own employees of Obelenерgo, but in tariff they included as a tariff for subcontractual works. And there are other types of activities. The profit of average Obelenерgo is 5,100 million hryvnias a year. We need to remember that most of them were already privatized, and the average cost of one Obelenерgo is about 300 million hryvnia. The business, which is business, it works as business, it paid back already, and that is not the main critical factor, but this needs to be remembered when decisions will be made on future tariff setting for these companies. Also, we need to remember that Obelenерgo is a business on capitalization. It's long-term business because that is the natural monopoly. They always have the buyer, they're the only seller in a year, in 5 years, in 10 years. You don't need any marketing, any sales department. This is the business which is very stable and long-term. And basically in this business, enhancing assets takes place till now at the expense of the tariff paid by the consumer, and also at the expense of new assets which are built and which are given to the balance of Obelenерgo by new consumers. One of the main ideas of RAB that stimulate investments into the company. The investment, it's not when just the taxpayer pays, but some other investments in this way to improve the quality of work. The basic parameters that are offered are 5% profitability for all the assets base and 14.79 for new assets base. Probably it's difficult to attract new investments at 14.79% because the credit you can get at the level of high 20 and so on. There's no sense to invest when you can just deposit your money. So the load goes to the first part, which is formed at the expense of the consumers. I believe that the decision of the Commission is to be based on 4 factors. The first is how critical the need is. It will be good if you switch to stimulating setting of tariffs, but nothing critical will happen if we don't do that. And it shouldn't be our objective to do it at any price. We need to keep in mind that we have obel gases that work without stimulating. There are water canals, and this is not even discussed there. Second is financial capacity and justice. If there's money, there are funds, then such decision could be made. Because tariffs for population are now raised, so there is some financial capacity for that. Then balanced besides Obelenергos, there is a green energy where tariffs are set by the law. They are tied up to the exchange rate of euro. Then we have to restore infrastructure in ATO zone, the Ukrenergo, and they all demand additional funds. And also interests of consumers. That's 4 out of 10.
Споживачі, особливо, чесно кажучи,
Because consumers don't feel that. I can give you an example. Kyiv Obelenерgo, Rivne Obelenерgo, Kировоград and Zhytomyr lived by stimulating tariff setting. Nothing has changed and consumers didn't feel anything. My relatives were building a plant in Kyiv region, and to get connected they had to give in cash 800,000 hryvnias to get connected. These are companies which were operating using stimulating tariff setting. For consumers to feel it, there should be some measures taken related to different moments and financial needs that costs money in accordance to the methodology which is suggested. That's additional 2.5 billion hryvnias which are needed for first 6. If all of them switch, then we need additionally 12 billion hryvnias. This is the model of the situation. What will be happening to assets if the system is in place? And if half of net profit is reinvested, our assets base will grow 3 times, and net 100 is the basic, it's like 1, and the net profit in 30 years will grow up 10 times. Every 8 years it will be doubled. This diagram is shown to raise the question about whether we need such large-scale upgrade. We are planning the program of energy savings in the country. We reduced the consumption of electricity in 2015 and 2014. We had it, and looking at long-term perspective, the question is, do we need to change assets so much? A lot has been mentioned about European practices. They do have this principle, but the devil is in detail. If in Europe Big Mac costs $3, here $1, that is normal situation. In Europe they didn't have this privatization. Second, the slides that Dmytro showed, they had profitability at the first invested capital and new capital. Our profitability is not for initial capital because the profitability rate is for reassessed asset but not invested. Tenders, that's another issue. Also connections, because Ukraine is very low in the rating, ease of doing business. Besides, in Europe there is probably no such difficult situation in the energy sector related to military actions and deficit of energy resources, so we need to take into account all the factors. And in Europe probably there's not such a burden on the consumers as in Ukraine. What's happening with the gas is not the problem of this year, but it's the problem related to how our market has been working for the last 5 years. We don't want the same situation to happen in the electricity sector, because in 2017, 2018, we might have a serious problem related to the problem with gas. Also, we need to keep in mind every Oblenergo has an owner, so we need to analyze who will be the beneficiary of the process, and the philosophical question from the point of view of development of the state. Is that what we want to receive? Because the biggest beneficiaries are Grigorishyn, Akhmetov, Voivodin, Babakov, Gitin, and owners of two Oblenergos, Lyovochkin, Boyka, Kolomoisky, Surkis. The state Oblenergos are state only in documents. And the additional net profit is about 5 billion hryvnias, and 2.5 million are to be distributed as dividends. Oblenergos are to earn. The problem is how much do we want to concentrate to get financial flows concentrated in hands of same people. Now let's talk about the consumer. About 12 billion hryvnias are needed for all the companies to switch to this new methodology. Most of this money from increasing tariffs for population will go for these needs. In 2016-2017, there will be additionally more than 20 billion collected. 12 will be the need, so that they switch to stimulating tariff setting. The profit of Oblenergo will grow in time because there's depreciation of old assets base, which is considered to be new assets base, and this is 14.79%, but not 5 like the old one. Talking about quality of services, what I see in the resolution is to we need to reach these indicators at the 8th year of operation. The main parameters that could be criticized, first, that's the profitability norm, 5% for old assets base, it's too high. 50% of net profit that goes for dividends. I know the position of the Ministry of Economy. They insist that only 25% should go for paying dividends. I believe that's correct position. After third year of operation, the depreciation is accrued as the new base with the profitability of 14.75%. That's wrong, because this should be not what is created via tariffs, but what is attracted from a side, foreign investments. And 14.79% profitability, I would suggest higher, because no shareholder will invest at such profitability rate. What is suggested, that is what the previous commission suggested, which was considered to be dependent on the oligarchs. They cut down the appetites of the oligarchs, and they suggested 0% of profitability first year, 1 second, 2 third, and the fourth year, and then 3% of profitability.
At the same time, I want to remind you, in 2013, the same companies that came today, that time they wanted to go to this option of stimulating tariff formation, because these companies were ready to work on the less favorable conditions. So the improvements of the condition is not reasonable. The next point is depreciation of old base of assets shouldn't go to the new base of assets, because there are cost of the consumers, not the involvement of the investments, and the old base of assets should reduce every year due to depreciation. Profit norm should accrue to this old base after depreciation calculation, and to the new base of assets that was made by somebody from outside with involvement investments. I said the norm to the new base could be better, and it would be nice to connect it somehow to the NBU rate. Now it is 22%, but we hope it will be reduced. Also, the initiative of the Ministry of Economics that should be executed, 75% of pure profit should be reinvested, because if networks are not financed, they are underfinanced. Let's put some amount of dividends. And one more moment. We are developing rather actively the electronic system of tenders Prozoro, and to let them go into the system, we shall give them condition to have tenders there, because we understand nobody will do it, or nobody will go there automatically. Nobody will have these honest tenders. We need to take some steps to make them doing it. And with this situation, we can go to a situation when from one side there is a legal profit, but from other side there will be illegal profit, and it can be increased because investment programs are 2 times bigger now. And if before it was 100 million, now it will be 25% from the 200 million. This is my vision. These are my proposals on these issues. Thank you very much, Andriy, for such a constructive critics, for your ideas. And also we have comment from Oleksandr, Deputy Minister of Fuel and Energy of Ukraine. Thank you. I just wanted to add few words. I'm not ready to discuss technical and economical aspects of this methodology. We were discussing it for a long time, and we were participating in the development in the previous committee. I don't know how to call you, but previous committee is not very nice, and it's unusual because you were in this commission as well. You were dealing with these issues. But what is the most important? We can discuss oligarchs a lot, that somebody owns our companies, but I want to discuss our technical condition. The condition of our energy administration in Ukraine is horrible. All the generic companies and distributors' equipment is obsolete. This equipment is working from 40s, 50s years of the last century. It's working outside the limits of technical possibilities. There are no renewals. I agree completely with Mr. Herus that money goes outside. That's why they should be focused, and decision of National Committee on implementing stimulating tariffs had this aim, because we need to have transparent open work. The most important is to make primary calculation of this stimulating tariff. And methodix Dmitry told us about is directed on showing that on the companies who goes to stimulating tariffs that we made correctly economically proved calculation, and only after that we start working to the profit of our consumer, because there are statements of this commission, and first clause is that the protection of our consumer is our priority. I don't agree with the proposal that this company is owned by this oligarch, this company is owned by that oligarch. All our energy sector works for our consumers, starting from the energy system as a whole. That's, I mean, when we have difficulties in making balance because we don't have resources, we don't have water. This year we don't have water. We never had such a situation before. That's why we start winter without adjustment, and it's very hard regime of work. But in these conditions, our distributing companies will play the role of regulators, and here the desire of National Committee to give more freedom to our distributor while talking to the consumer works in the interest of the consumer, to give them possibility to involve the investments. This one of the tasks of stimulating tariffs. If we really have stimulating tariffs, investor will see the possibilities and he will put more money, and we will develop our networks. I hope that Commission won't go from this way, and the only thing I wanted to add is this gradation, 6 first enterprises. On the next year there are other enterprises. We should deal with stimulating tariff according to their readiness, and I really hope that in 2016, and we planned pilot project to this year, I hope it will show the rationality and the evaluation of the true situation of this methodology. I hope 2016 will show it, and then in the future we'll need to implement it forward, because as you understand, Oblenergo have different conditions, and maybe it wouldn't be efficient. That's why investors don't believe us, because today we take the decision, tomorrow we postpone the decision, or we cancel. That is the worst situation possible. And I want to thank you one more time for the presentation. Great job. And thank you, Oleksandr. And now there is a time for questions and comments. I would like to address few questions I had already because there were a lot of emotionally manipulating comments, and the second presentation of the procedure of the Commissioner of Andriy Herus confirmed that he didn't read the act. As an example, is it obliging to see the quality indicators? Yes, it's obliging. At the end, these figures that we need to achieve and the current status can be calculated by this appropriate schedule, and there are penalties every year for every clause. Second, not understanding of the sense of stimulating reforming, because its sense is to define what is required, what we don't need to do. And after the discussion of doing it 50%, 70%, such position of Ministry of Economics shows us they don't understand the essence of stimulating tariff formation. As for us, usage of obligatory reinvestment is a penalty for the companies, a penalty for the consumer, because this obliging 50% from the old base might lead to the increase of the tariffs. But as we understand that needing the investments is huge at the first stage, we decided to do it this way. And the issue of ownership, I'm not going to comment it, and I just want to give to Mr. Herus the report that will explain while usage stimulating reforming, we don't make the evaluation by the back calculation in what was the amount of what was sum of money the company was bought. It is a calculation of the cost of the company, and it was made by the fund of state property. And here there are special criteria. And today we're dealing with other networks, not with this one that we're calculating that time. And the third, that base that we have, this obsolete base, it's not disposed, and all these factors are considered in the evaluation. I was waiting for more serious questions and comments from the experts, from the audience, and I want to show you something that nobody except for Mr. Herus mentioned. How to achieve the CD level, that is the consummation of consumer. It calculated in minutes by year. During old committee, we decided it would be 40 and 70 minutes. Here on this table from the left side, you could see the benchmark with energy regulators in Europe, and we can see two cuts here in 2008 and 2012. And as you can see, this 40 and 70 minutes, only 5 countries have them: Germany, Switzerland, Luxembourg, and Denmark. These results are connected to the network configuration. On the right side, in these blocks, you can see the structure of cable and wire networks, and in the right top corner, you can see 100% cable networks. In this case, 40 minutes criteria is possible. On the left corner, you can see Ireland and Poland, and there are 500 minutes. In our order, this 40 and 70 minutes that were established by the previous committee, they were thinking about ideal situation, but it's not possible to achieve, because for that we would need to change the network configuration completely. That's why we change these indicators to more achievable figures. And but we need 8 years to achieve it, not 10 years. About profitability norms, this cost depends on the cost of the capital. And we found one of the problem in the that was in the old calculations. We want to correct it because in the last period it says that from the second regulating period all the old depreciation gets profitability norm. We agree it's not correct. We are ready to adjust it. We will publish this project because the right way is total amount of depreciation is considered, and our option is a step to our consumer because we consider assets and we consider situation for the next 30-40 years. Thank you. As far as I understand this question to you, but please remember that the briefing of Minister of Energy will be the next, so you don't have enough time. Alexey Kucherenko, deputy head of the mayor of the city, of the Consumer Protection Committee. We are very grateful to you that you are thinking about you so much, and Mr. Svetelik and other managers, but it's not about our provision, but it's about where are you going to find funds to do all that. And I understand the arguments, your arguments of other speaker, but I can say you what I'm not satisfied as a consumer. First of all, I would like to remind you, is 1997, you know, there was a beginning of these actions, that is so-called reform and privatization in energy sector, and there was Mr. Sklarov, some other people, there was so-called English model, and in this English model privatization was possible, but first of all, it should create generation at the moment, at the market. And first of all, we needed to create market regulator. It wasn't created so far, but it's not the question to you, it's a question to our politicians. But I want to remind you that in 1997, when Obelenерgo was bought for coins, they bought them just for a few pennies, 20 million hryvnia, 15 million hryvnia. That was the price of the company at that time. And due to the generation, they could make the investment condition. Did you know how did they pay for them? By the papers and by the mutual calculations. And you understand how collapsed our energy sector is. Everybody who bought the enterprises, they're billionaires, but the energy sector is completely collapsed. So as you can understand, it's crazy. And let's not speculate on this. Consumers have much more problems that we discussed, and I have very direct question. I don't want to put all these problems to you because first of all, politicians are guilty in this situation. And me as a consumer, I want only one thing. All the time I'm hearing speculations about the requirements of Euro Commission, Euro directives, European experience. I will be interested in that. Not when we have their level of profits, because our level of profits don't allow us to use this. But this directive number 1, it needs a real independent legal regulator. And could you please tell your seniors, now Mr. Dmytro will come, but we as consumers, we can't read that in the court your decision is cancelled. It is not constitutional. Why your senior managers, politicians, why it is planned only to the fourth quarter of the 2015. And in the same directive, it is foreseen that special Institute of Consumer Protection should be created and should be called an energy ombudsman. Somebody should oppose you. Somebody with special knowledge, and you should be as arbiter to this process. I'm just begging you, please understand that, because we are at the dead end now. And the third, regarding this question, is this stimulated method is not bad, but why didn't you use it to utility companies when there is a complete mess? Why do you have this selective criteria starting from Oblenergia? And I have no answer to this question. Your first question, our role in the law and its agreement by the Cabinet of Ministers and transfer to Verkhovna Rada, we did everything possible. And now we are just explaining to different parties our main concept, and we keep repeating the same thing. The acceptance of this law doesn't depend on me. It depends on Verkhovna Rada of Ukraine. Why? Why there is no energy regulator ombudsman? The answer is in the absence of the law also. And about the possibility of participation in the discussion, in critics, you can see it on this slide. Even in 2013, it was accepted. In 2015, open transparency person started with online translation, with media. You could come, you could ask questions, you could comment it. And the third answer is
Може опанувати в цій ситуації. Скажіть, це якийсь має бути такий...
Пане Олексію, ви ж опонуєте.
Розумієте?
І чому директиви або не директиви, яку галузь першою була?
Why the directive? Well, in coalition agreement and the program of activity of the government, it took transfer in 2015-2016. Electricity sector is best prepared, and also as to moving to this system and the sphere of utilities. We believe that this needs to be done, but after
Логічних втрат тощо. Але це шлях у майбутнє.
this is the way to the future, this should be done. Listening to Andriy's speech, I noticed two things. The problem of procurements, that's the serious problem, there are manipulations. And there's a proposal as to transparency. What is the view of the Commission on that? And also technical conditions again. This is a serious problem, everyone's talking about that again. What is the understanding of the Commission? This is addressed by stimulating tariff setting. They are interested in showing realistic expenditures.
За логікою цієї
They're interested to reduce it. As to investment programs, similar. We support the transparency, but this is the balance which we have reached. It was not correctly said that I did not read the resolution. Item 11 of the resolution says that the 8th year. Read the resolution, all the resolution. Annually we are calculating the indicator. And the deviation. The Commission, after the analysis, suggested the profitability rate 0.2%.
підняти до
Non-affrontability from the very first year. But it leads to additional, very serious financial funds, and they are sent to dividends straight away. Could you explain, please, why 5%? How did you calculate it? It's clear it's not the cost of capital. It can't be 5%. Why did you elevate it from 0 to 5? And the second question, why to the new base of assets there is such a figure? Because as for today, it's not the actual cost. I will start from the end. According to the law of natural monopolies, it was defined that National Committee at the Ministry of Economics know about this. And this year we got a letter from that the norm of profitability is 14.8. And according to the logics of the Ministry of Economics, that's real rate. About the old base of assets, why there is 5, the answer is the following. Notwithstanding the fact that in the past it was put 0, 1, 2, 3, and it was final version, because according to the initial version it was 0, but the mine is in different aspect, because also depreciation of the old base of assets had new profitability rate, but it's not fair at all. That option that was proposed by us, 5%, it's 3 times less than the rate of Ministry of Economics, and according to our opinion, it will allow in the first periods to have funds to reinvest and get the quality for our consumers and renew all these networks. The question is, it's not our first or last meeting on tariff formation, because these questions that we didn't ask National Committee or some other bodies, and how to calculate some regular or middle or force majeure regulations. It has no sense, and we need to think in what way to tune the system.
75, 0 чи 5% ставки. Він полягає в зовсім іншому. Треба просто знати, як користуватися цим механізмом стимулюючого тарифоутворення. І те, що ми це зробимо, воно покаже справжні їх витрати, і на горизонті 3-5 років ми маємо завжди можливість оновити показники якості і оновити показники ефективності, які необхідно досягти. Дякую.
Ну, я думаю, що остаточні коментарі.
У мене питання дізнатися версію комісії. Наскільки, за вашою версією, доведеться підняти тарифи на передачу і на поставку для обленерго з переведенням на нову систему тарифоутворення? Це перше. І друге, скільки коштів додатково потрібно для них, якщо всі вони перейдуть на стимулюючий тарифоутворення?
How much money additionally is needed if they all switch to this system? Where will they get this money? This decision is individual for each oblenergo. No, I cannot give you an exact number. I showed you in the presentation that depreciation had to be increased 4 times. As to the sources of financing, these will be our consumers, industrial and households.
Складуться, вони мають бути. І завдання комісії буде задати той графік якості.
The task of the commission is for the consumers to receive high quality and not expensive service. Thank you. I believe that we exchanged the ideas as to stimulating tariff setting.
І я так думаю, що це параметри також подальшої роботи. А також хочу повернутися до ідеї посилення ролі регулятора і незалежності регулятора. Ми приділяємо дуже велику увагу.
We pay a lot of attention to the regulator. We know that the working group of the parliament is working. And we pay a lot of attention to these issues. Thank you to presenters. And I hope that this discussion will lead to normal evolution. Thank you.